Hi, my name's Anna and I'm a queer science fiction and fantasy writer.
Hello, my name is Oliver and I'm a trans guy who makes videos about LGBTQIA+ people where they get to talk about anything that they want that somehow relates to them being queer. In early July I travelled up north to Sundsvall, and while there I met up with a local queer writer, Anna.
My name is Anna Jakobsson Lund and I'm from a small town called Sundsvall in Sweden, and I live here with my 2 kids, and I'm an author and I run my own publishing company. I also have a partner in Skåne, which is 1,000 kilometers from here. So I have a long distance relationship.
This is how Anna identifies.
My prime identifier, I would say, for my sexuality is I'm a fetishist. I had a bit of a journey realizing what that was for me and how that made me feel, and also what it meant for the rest of my romantic sexual orientation. And I had a period when I thought that maybe I was aro, and then I stumbled up onto my partner and we hit it off, and I fell head over heels for her, and now I would say maybe pan, maybe some kind of aro spectrum. And when it comes to gender, I'm kind of gender queer, but at an age and a situation where I use she as a pronoun, and it's not that important for me. As a queer person, I'm maybe a bit loose around the edges with my identity. And today I feel fine about that.
She started by saying that she identifies as a fetishist, and this is something that she's felt since she was very young.
I remember I've always had the feelings regarding my object, and always, like any other sexuality, I have memories from when I'm 4 or 5 realizing that this is interesting, but I didn't know what to do with it. Even when I later became more of a sexual person, I didn't know what I would do with this part. I didn't know how it fit in. I didn't have a word for it. I didn't have any idea of it, good or bad. I have a lot of acquaintances that had maybe shame over what they were feeling, but I really didn't do the connection, and therefore didn't know that this was something strange. I just knew that this was something for me, and it was maybe personal. I didn't talk about it a lot. And then when I was 25, 26, I got a name for it, but still didn't know really what to do with it. It took another 10 years, finding a group of friends that were more interested in these kind of things. And maybe I'm from an older generation, because one of my younger friends said, "You hadn't Googled it?" And I realized that of course I should Google it because I know how to Google. I'm not an old lady. But then I Googled it and found out that not only is there a large community of people that are like me as general fetishists, but there are people like me with the same kind of object and the same kind of idea about the object. That is something that I find really fascinating, that many other sexualities, there's this social component. You know, if you're a heterosexual, you know you're supposed to think that this and this and this is attractive, and this is interesting, and this is how you should behave, and this is how your sexuality should work. But as a fetishist, I had no contact with other fetishists. There's no social component, because as fetishism is shown in movies and popular culture, it's just bad, it's wrong, it's nothing like the way it actually is. And then all these people in this fora on the internet have the same kind of idea about what's sexy about this is an object that's nothing like. Nobody that's not a fetishist would think that this is something sexy, and still here we are, all of us, thinking about it in quite a lot of detail in the same way, and I find that really interesting.
Anna never heard of fetishists while growing up, and this is why she wants to be open with this part of her identity.
Fetishists are almost never open. We don't have to be. It's like a blessing and a curse, because you don't have to be open if you don't want to. But if nobody steps up and there's nobody that's open, then there's this big, nothingness where you exist, and you're told from the queer community that you're not part of it, because if it's not about who you're attracted to, then it's not a sexuality. And if there's nobody there to say, "But look at my experience, I had this experience and it's so much like yours," and it has to be a sexuality. Can we have a discussion about it? If there's nobody there to have this discussion, because there's this idea that this is something you should keep private, and it's a perversion, and it was taken off the disorder list from the Swedish authorities in 2009. I mean, it's 30 years longer than for homosexuality, because nobody was taking the fight. Nobody was even saying maybe this should be off the list. I don't know. I don't want to be a fighter for it, but I also don't want people to grow up like I did and not even knowing what word to Google. That, I think, is something that I've been trying to work towards with my writing and some of my social media.
Anna finalized her first book when she just had her first child.
And I had this idea for a book that I've been writing on and off during different times of my life, and had it on some courses in the university and stuff. And I thought maybe I will try to get that finished. So I finished that book, and it wasn't interesting enough to be picked up by any big publishers. I knew that. So I thought maybe we can make this book happen, and then so I can have a book. So we made this book, and it's a really bad book. It's really boring, nothing happens in it. It didn't sell, but I learned a lot from it. I thought to myself, this was fun. I don't want to write this kind of book ever again because it's boring. I want to write something fun, and I want to continue this, and I want to be better. And then I had this idea from when I was like a teenager. I had this scene that I've written that I didn't know what to do with. And I realized that, well, maybe this is some kind of an adventure story. This could be something that I would like to read and write. So then I wrote another book and took everything that I've learned, and it actually turned out quite nicely. That's a book that, even though it's just my second book, it's a book that I still like a lot. And it's actually been translated, or I've had it translated. So in English it's Article 3, and it's a dystopian story about a time a couple of hundred years ahead of our time, where Europe and the rest of the world has fallen and then been built back up. And I wrote that because I work with social services. I'm a political scientist at heart, and I saw these dystopian stories after the Hunger Games becoming more and more just some lame love stories, and then set in some kind of a dystopian world building. That was it, really. And I think that dystopian stories should have some kind of other purpose. They should shed a light on our society, and they should make us think and make us want to rebel and make things better. So I wrote 3 books in that series. I don't know if they're any better than any of the other stuff, but they are a bit different.
This is also when she started writing non-normative characters.
I tried to write characters that weren't so normative. I had this idea that if I had to change the gender of a character because of reasons, because I thought this will be better, then I shouldn't have to change anything about the character, because the character shouldn't be stereotypically any gender. So I wrote this book, and I realized that I really like experimenting with meeting different characters, meeting people that have walked different paths of life and that can teach me something and that interests me.
The characters developed in her following book.
And after that I wrote a book called Equilibrium. There's this non-binary main character. As opposed to saying this is a girl character and she's not being stuck in this stereotypical box, how can I describe her? I started to think, what about a character there is no idea about how this person should act. There's nothing to push from. It's so easy making a girl that's not stereotypical, because you just describe any girl you know, and then you're there. But for this it was like, but what if there's just not this label girl or boy? What if there's something else? And I didn't know much about this from the beginning. This is way back in 2016 or something. And I just didn't know much. And I used that book to explore this question and also explore myself. Ari, the main character, is really certain about one thing, and that is that they have this gender that's not boy or girl. But Ari is really insecure about every other thing. So the identity search and the journey for Ari is not about gender. And that felt like me. I don't know if I think that this matters so much. I know that maybe in a society where we had more than two categories more spoken and clearly, then I wouldn't fall into one of those two. I would fall into something else, but it's not that important. Other things are more important.
Anna has some really interesting thoughts on the part that queer characters play specifically in fantasy and science fiction.
Because I write science fiction and fantasy and dystopia, I can make my own rules. I can make my own worlds. I build my own worlds. I have a series of books set in space where there are a lot of different species of, well, human-like characters. They can all communicate, and some of them fall in love. They can fall in love with different species. And then if the number of arms you have, if you have 2 or 4, is not a problem, then why would gender be such an issue? And if you fall in love with someone that you most definitely won't be able to make a baby with because you're different species, and sexuality isn't about making babies because some of the species, they don't make babies that way, well, then most certainly you wouldn't pair up in a kind of a 2-gender pair for life. It's not logical to keep this Victorian idea that we have and just putting it in space. And doing so, if you have a space book and you take an old Victorian idea about there should only be 2 people in your relationship and there should be two genders and only that, if you put that in space, then you're writing a political book. The book is still political. It's only taking another, maybe a more Victorian idea about what's important in society. When you write science fiction and fantasy books, when you build a society, you put in stuff. If you make all the really interesting characters male, then you're political. It's no more political to make all the interesting people either female or any other gender. That's just political in another way. All culture is political.
Anna thinks it's important that there are books with queer characters.
Everybody has the right to see themselves in popular culture. That's the first thing. It's maybe not why you write and create queer culture, but you have that right. If you're not shown, or if you're shown in narrow way or a stereotypical way, then that's how people will see you. If you're not shown, you're invisible, and if you're shown wrongly, then this is how we see the world. Popular culture is how we can in any way expand our world beyond ourselves and our closest friends and family. So I think that is really important. And also for books, you often get inside of the characters in a book. So then you can also get this empathy from reading, knowing that this person has a struggle, and it's not much my struggle, but I can realize that we both have a struggle. And also, if we want to have a true mirror of society, then of course queer characters have a role in it.
Let's end the video with Anna's dreams and hopes for the future.
I'm pretty happy not being famous. That fame seems awful, so I don't want to be famous. That seems like the worst thing ever. But I want to reach people. I want to reach as many people as I can, and it's really fulfilling to realize that you reach somebody that really connects with your books. And also because Sweden is a small country, and the community around indie booksellers is kind of small, so you get a lot of community out of it, both with your fellow writers and fellow indie publishers, but also with readers. You get a lot of close friends that maybe begin as your readers, and you have a lot of, you can ask people about things because you know them from them reading your books, and they maybe show up to some event, or you have contacts on Instagram, and you feel like you get all the good stuff from being famous without having to be famous, because you get to connect to people, and you get to make a tiny difference in some people's lives, and that's such a rush. So that is something I hope to do more.
If you enjoyed watching that video, please like, comment, subscribe and share the video. I really appreciate you showing your love in that way. If you also want to support the channel financially, that's possible via Patreon, but really no pressure. See you next time!